I never thought my own heart could feel this heavy from something so simple. That evening, I was just taking my usual slow walk down Elmwood Lane when I noticed my daughter's curtains pulled shut, but her front door slightly open. That's when I saw it. My son's car parked right in her driveway. My chest tightened. They hadn't told me they'd be together. No invitation. No call. Not even a polite excuse. Just nothing. A chill ran through me as laughter spilled out from inside. A sound I hadn't heard from them in months. My name is Eleanor Grace Whitmore, and at 72, I thought I'd learned every lesson life could teach me. I raised 2 children, Michael and Anna, on my own after my husband passed when I was 43. We never had much, but I made sure they had the best I could give. I took double shifts at the diner, mended clothes until my fingers ached, and even sold the little gold bangles my mother left me to help with their college fees. Michael was always my boy who smiled with his whole face, the one who'd sit with me at the kitchen table long after Anna had gone to bed, talking about his dreams. I truly believed, that bond was unbreakable. The night I saw his car at Anna's without a word to me, something in me cracked. Not in anger, yet, but in confusion. I stood there, the cool evening air pressing against my skin, listening to the muffled voices inside. A woman's laugh. Anna's. Then Michael's deeper chuckle. Plates clinking. Chairs scraping. It was the sound of family. But I was outside the door. I told myself maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe Michael had stopped by on his way somewhere else. But my gut, that mother's gut that has never once failed me, whispered otherwise. As I walked home, the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement, my mind wandered to all the things I had done for them over the years. I had given Anna the down payment for her house when she and Greg were starting out. I'd signed over the title of my small lake cabin to Michael and his wife, Sandra, when they said they needed a family place to raise their kids in summers. I never asked for anything in return. Not even a thank you some days. I believed family was about giving, not keeping score. But lately, there had been small signs. A missed call returned with a curt text. My birthday last month. Celebrated with a quick lunch at a noisy cafe instead of the home-cooked dinner I'd imagined. Anna brushing off my questions with, "Oh, Mom, it's nothing you need to worry about." Sandra giving me that polite smile that doesn't reach the eyes. That night, after seeing Michael's car at Anna's, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea growing cold in my hands. I replayed every odd moment from the past year, and a quiet unease settled into my bones. I thought of the times I'd offered help, financial, emotional, and how quickly they'd accepted. But when I needed company after my hip surgery, I was met with excuses about busy schedules and sick kids. I went to bed that night, but sleep was a stranger. Around 2 a.m., I got up and opened the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside were the papers, property deeds, bank statements, copies of checks I'd written to them over the years. I'd kept them not out of mistrust, but because my late husband always said, "Eleanor, keep a paper trail. Life can turn on you when you least expect it." As I looked at those papers, an uncomfortable thought crept in. Had my children been taking advantage of me? The next morning, I decided to pay Anna a visit. No call ahead. I wanted to see her face when she opened the door. The walk to her house was quiet, except for the sound of my cane tapping the sidewalk. When I arrived, I noticed a few things that made my stomach tighten. New curtains, a brand new SUV in the driveway that I knew wasn't Greg's, and the faint smell of coffee drifting from the open window. Anna opened the door, surprise flickering in her eyes before she masked it with a smile. "Mom, this is unexpected." "Morning," I said, stepping inside before she could think of a reason to block me. Michael was there, sitting at the kitchen table with Sandra, both of them mid-bite into a breakfast I clearly hadn't been invited to. The air went thick. "Mom, we were just—" Michael started, but I held up my hand. "Don't explain. I just came to see how you all are doing." My voice was calm, but inside, questions screamed for answers. I stayed only 15 minutes, making polite conversation while my eyes took in everything. The pile of unopened mail on the counter with my name on one envelope, the property tax notice sticking out of it, the faint tension between Anna and Sandra whenever they exchanged glances. When I got home, I called my oldest friend, Margaret. She'd been my rock since we were schoolgirls, and she had a sharp mind for spotting trouble. I told her what I'd seen, what I'd been feeling. She was silent for a long moment before saying, "Eleanor, I think you need to start protecting yourself. Something's not right here." Her words hung in the air long after we ended the call. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, but this time I wasn't holding tea. I was holding resolve. Margaret's voice echoed in my head the next morning. Protect yourself. Those 2 words weren't just advice. They were a warning. I started with the envelope I'd seen on Anna's counter. It had my name on it for a reason, and I hadn't given anyone permission to collect my mail. My heart thumped as I went to the post office and asked the clerk if my mail had been redirected. Sure enough, the clerk frowned and pulled up a record. Says here you authorized a forwarding to your daughter's address. I most certainly did not, I said, my voice trembling but firm. He showed me the authorization form. My signature was there, or rather, a clumsy imitation of it. A slow, cold anger began to stir inside me. On the walk home, my cane tapping faster than usual, memories hit me like bricks. The time my checkbook went missing for a week. The property tax notice I'd seen in Anna's kitchen. The family vacation cabin I'd given Michael. Was it even in his name, or had it been quietly sold? By the time I reached my kitchen, I already had the cedar chest open again. I pulled out the deeds, the bank records, the letters from the lawyer who handled my will years ago. My fingers moved slowly but my mind was racing. I called Margaret back that afternoon. I think they've been meddling with my finances, I told her. She sighed, a sound heavy with sympathy. Ellie, this is going to hurt, but you need someone who can go through those papers with you. Someone who knows what to look for. I can put you in touch with my nephew. He's an attorney. Discreet. Sharp as a tack. 2 days later, I was sitting across from Daniel, a young man with kind eyes but the no-nonsense tone of someone who'd seen too many family disputes. I slid the stack of papers toward him. He read in silence for nearly half an hour, flipping pages, jotting notes. Finally, he looked up. Mrs. Whitmore, there are several transactions here that should raise concern. First, the transfer of your cabin. According to these records, it was sold last year. 8 months after you signed it over to your son. Do you know where the proceeds went? My mouth went dry. No. He told me they were still using it. Daniel continued. Also, I see withdrawals from your savings account that don't match your signature style on file. And this mail forwarding? That's a serious red flag. I sat very still, gripping my hands in my lap so he wouldn't see them shake. What do I do now? He leaned forward. First, we document everything. We put a hold on any accounts tied to your name. We get a forensic handwriting analyst if needed. And we do not confront them until we have proof. Solid proof. Walking out of his office that day, I felt something strange. Yes, the hurt was there. Raw and deep. But under it a small steady flame had been lit. I had been a giver all my life. But I was not a fool. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel and I worked quietly. He traced the sale of the cabin, confirming the money had gone into a joint account belonging to Michael and Anna. An account I'd never known existed. He found my signature forged on 2 loan applications, one of them tied to my house. At night, I'd sit in my armchair with a blanket over my knees, staring out the window at the street lamp's pale glow. I thought about the children I'd raised, the scraped knees I'd kissed, the sleepless nights I'd endured when they were sick, the years I'd gone without new clothes so they could have what they needed. And I thought, how did we get here? One evening, I got a call from Sandra. Her voice was sugary, but I could hear the tension underneath. Eleanor, we were thinking you should update your will. You know, just to make sure things are in order. I nearly laughed. They had no idea what I already knew. Thank you for your concern, I said evenly. I've already started reviewing my affairs. That night, I wrote in my journal. This is no longer just about betrayal. This is about survival. The next morning, I poured my tea and opened my journal, reading the last words I'd written. This is about survival. The words seemed to pulse on the page, a quiet drumbeat in my chest. Daniel had already prepared the legal freeze on my accounts, and we'd switched my mailing address back to my own home with added security. But I knew this was only the beginning. If my children had the audacity to forge my signature and sell property behind my back, then they were capable of more. I called Margaret and asked her to come over. By the time she arrived, I had the dining table covered with neatly stacked folders, bank statements, letters, photographs of the cabin, and a copy of my original will. Margaret sat down slowly, her sharp blue eyes scanning the table. "Ellie, they've been stripping you piece by piece." I nodded. "And they don't think I know. That's my advantage." We sat in silence for a moment, only the sound of the old clock ticking in the corner. Finally, I said, "I need to know every move they've made. Not just the money. I want to see the pattern. That's how I'll stop them." Margaret gave a small smile. "I'll help. But Ellie, this is going to be painful." "It already is," I replied. Over the next week, I became a quiet detective in my own life. I went through old receipts, noted dates when Michael and Anna suddenly had new things: a car, home renovations, expensive vacations. I compared those dates to large withdrawals from my accounts. The overlaps were almost too perfect. I also started paying attention to their behavior. Anna called me twice in 3 days, something she hadn't done in months. Her tone was oddly sweet, like she was testing the waters. Michael stopped by, just to check on me, but I noticed how his eyes kept darting to the writing desk where I kept my important papers. One night, after a long day of sorting documents, I phoned Daniel. "I think they're gearing up for something big," I told him. "They're circling me." His voice was calm but urgent. "Then we move faster. I'll have everything ready for you to sign next week. Once you do, they won't be able to touch a penny, or your house without your say-so." I slept better that night, knowing my future wasn't entirely in their hands anymore. A few days later, I got an unexpected visit. Greg, Anna's husband, stood at my door holding a pie. "Anna thought you'd like this," he said. I invited him in and we made small talk. But I noticed he avoided meeting my eyes for long. When I offered him tea, he declined quickly and stood to leave. That's when I saw it. An envelope slipped from his jacket pocket as he reached for the door handle. He picked it up fast, but not before I saw my name typed on it in bold letters. The moment he left, I wrote in my journal, "They're planning something." The pie was just cover. Later that week, Daniel handed me a folder. Inside were all the documents I needed: a new will that left nothing directly to Michael or Anna, a living trust in my name, and legal orders to reclaim any funds taken through forgery. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal on the first page. "Daniel, are you sure this will hold?" He met my gaze squarely. "Yes. And when the time comes, you'll have the choice: to confront them or simply let them find out the hard way." That night, I sat by the window again, looking out at the dark street. Somewhere between the hurt and the betrayal, a strange calm had settled over me. I wasn't powerless anymore. They thought I was still the giving, naive mother who'd sign anything placed in front of her. They didn't realize I was already setting the stage for the day they'd discover just how wrong they were. The first step of my quiet setup was simple: keep smiling. I called Anna and invited her for tea, pretending nothing had changed. She arrived wearing a silk blouse I knew wasn't cheap, carrying that same polite smile I'd grown to distrust. We sat at my kitchen table, steam curling from our teacups. I let her chatter about the children, Greg's new business idea, and how expensive life is these days. I nodded, sipped, and waited. Sure enough, she brought it up. "Mom, Michael and I were talking. It might be a good idea to put the house in a joint name. In case something happens." I tilted my head, keeping my voice warm. "That's thoughtful of you, dear. Why don't you bring Michael over this weekend so we can discuss it together?" Her eyes lit up just enough for me to know she thought she'd won a small victory. But inside, I felt the flame of resolve burn hotter. 2 days later, they arrived. Michael in his pressed shirt, Anna with a folder tucked under her arm. Sandra wasn't there. I suspected she preferred to work behind the scenes. We sat in the living room. Michael leaned forward, all earnestness. Mom, this is just to protect you. No one's trying to take anything away. I forced a small chuckle. Of course not. Why would my own children ever do that? Anna slid the folder toward me. I didn't open it. Instead, I excused myself to the kitchen and returned with my own stack of papers, the ones Daniel had prepared. I set them neatly on the coffee table. I had some documents drawn up too, I said casually. Michael glanced at the seal on the top page, and I watched the faint flicker of unease cross his face. Anna tried to mask hers, but her fingers tightened on her teacup. These ensure, I continued, that everything I've worked for stays exactly where I want it. No misunderstandings, no accidents, no surprises. I looked directly at Michael. And no one, not even family, can make changes without my permission. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then Michael sat back, his jaw tight. That's good, Mom. We just want you safe. Of course, I said, smiling as if I believed him. When they left, I called Margaret. It's done, I told her. They know something's different, even if they can't see the whole picture yet. That's the best way, she said. Let them stew. The uncertainty will do half your work for you. Over the next week, I noticed changes. Michael called less. Anna's messages became curt. There was no more talk about helping me manage my affairs. But I also noticed the watchfulness, the way they seemed to be waiting for something, perhaps hoping I'd slip. I didn't. Instead, I prepared for the final step, confronting them with the truth on my terms. Daniel suggested I invite them both for dinner, have Margaret present as a witness, and lay everything out. When you do, he said, you'll have every document, every statement, every proof in your hand. They won't be able to twist it. I agreed. But I decided on one small twist of my own. I wanted them to feel the weight of their actions, not just hear it. The night before the dinner, I set the table with my best china, the same set I'd used for family holidays when Michael and Anna were small. I polished the silver until it gleamed. In the center, I placed the cedar chest, the one that had held all my evidence. It sat there like a silent witness, ready for the moment I would open it and let the truth spill out. As I stood back, looking at the table, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. The night of the dinner, the air in my home felt heavier than usual. I had lit candles, set out the roast chicken, and even baked an apple pie, the kind Michael used to request every birthday. It looked like a family gathering. In truth, it was an ambush of the quietest kind. Margaret arrived first, her presence a comforting anchor. She sat beside me at the head of the table, her eyes scanning every detail. "You're ready?" she asked softly. I nodded. "I've been ready for weeks." At exactly 6 o'clock, Michael and Anna walked in together. Michael had his easy smile on, but his eyes flicked immediately to the cedar chest in the center of the table. Anna paused for just a fraction too long before greeting me. "Smells amazing, Mom," Michael said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. I noticed his grip on my shoulder was a shade too firm, as if reminding me of some unspoken control he thought he had. We sat, made small talk, passed dishes around. I listened more than I spoke, letting them relax. I wanted the reveal to hit like a cold wave. Halfway through the meal, I set down my fork. "I want to thank you both for coming tonight. There's something important we need to discuss." Michael glanced at Anna, then back at me. "Sure, Mom. What's on your mind?" I reached forward, opened the cedar chest, and began placing documents on the table one by one. "This," I said, tapping the first stack, "is proof that the cabin I gave you, Michael, was sold last year. You told me you were still using it for family trips." His smile faltered. Anna shifted uncomfortably. "This," I continued, sliding out another file, "is a record of withdrawals from my savings account, withdrawals I didn't authorize." The handwriting analyst confirmed the signatures were forged. Anna's eyes widened, her mouth opening slightly before she caught herself. Michael straightened in his chair, his jaw tightening. "And here," I said, pulling out the final envelope, "is the mail forwarding request with my forged signature." My personal and legal correspondence was being sent to Anna's address for months without my consent. The room was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock. Michael finally spoke. "Mom, you're misunderstanding." "No, Michael," I interrupted, my voice steady. "For once, I understand perfectly." I looked at Anna. "I gave you both so much. My time, my savings, my trust. And you decided that wasn't enough. You decided to take what you wanted, regardless of what it cost me." Anna's face flushed deep red. "We were just trying to secure your future?" I finished for her. "What about mine?" Margaret placed a hand on my arm, a silent reminder to keep my composure. I straightened in my chair. "I've taken steps to protect everything I have left. My accounts are frozen to anyone but me. My will has been rewritten. And any further attempt to access my property or finances without permission will be met with legal action." Michael leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "You'd really take your own children to court?" I met his gaze without flinching. "If my own children steal from me, yes. I would." The weight of my words hung in the air. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint clink of Margaret setting down her teacup. When they left, there were no hugs, no promises to visit soon. Just stiff goodbyes and the sound of the front door clicking shut. Margaret looked at me. "How do you feel?" I exhaled slowly. "Like I've finally locked the door to a house that's been open too long." That night, for the first time in months, I slept without waking in the middle of the night to stare at the ceiling. The morning after the confrontation, my house felt different. Not quieter. Just lighter. I made myself a full breakfast for the first time in months. Eggs, toast, and the good coffee I'd been saving. As I sat by the kitchen window, sunlight spilling across the table, I realized I no longer felt like I was waiting for the next blow. Margaret stopped by with fresh flowers. "These are for your victory," she said, placing them in a vase. I smiled. "It doesn't feel like a victory yet. More like a ceasefire." "That's because you've been surviving, Ellie," she said gently. "Now it's time to start living again." Daniel called later that day. "Everything's in place," he assured me. "Legally, you're untouchable now. And if they try anything else, we'll have them cornered in no time." I thanked him, but I also knew something he didn't. The legal papers were only part of my protection. The real change was inside me. For too long, I'd been afraid to believe my own instincts. I'd brushed off warning signs because the people hurting me were family. That would never happen again. Over the next weeks, I reclaimed parts of my life I'd been neglecting. I joined a small reading group at the library. I started walking every morning, not just to pass the time, but to greet neighbors I'd once hurried past. I even began working in the garden again. My roses, which had been choked with weeds last year, were blooming in pale pinks and deep reds. Each morning I'd prune them carefully, breathing in the sweet scent and thinking how life could surprise you with beauty again, once you stopped letting weeds take over. One afternoon, while I was trimming the lavender, Michael's car slowed in front of my house. He didn't stop, just drove by. I watched him go without waving. There was no anger in me, no urge to call out, just a calm certainty that I didn't need to open my door to anyone who hadn't earned the right to stand there. Anna tried once, sending a short text. "We should talk." I replied, "When you're ready to be honest." She never responded. Margaret and I took a weekend trip to the lake. Just the two of us. The water was calm, the air cool with the scent of pine. Sitting on the dock with my feet dangling above the ripples, I told her, "I thought losing them would break me." She looked out over the water. "You didn't lose them, Ellie. They lost you. Big difference." Her words stayed with me. When I came home, I hung a small frame in my living room. Inside it, I placed a single sentence I'd written in my journal the night after the confrontation. "Self-respect is worth more than any inheritance." Every time I pass it, I remember what it took to get here. The betrayal, the pain, the quiet strength it took to stand up, even against my own blood. I am Eleanor Grace Whitmore. I am 72 years old. And I will never again apologize for protecting what is mine. My home, my heart, and my peace. It's strange How endings often don't come with a bang but with a whisper. Weeks had passed since the dinner confrontation, and my life had settled into a rhythm I hadn't known in years. The phone rang less, my doorbell almost never. And I liked it that way. One morning, as I was folding laundry, I noticed the old family photo on my dresser. Michael at 8 years old, Anna at 5, both grinning wide in front of the Christmas tree. My chest tightened, but it wasn't the stabbing ache I'd felt before. It was something gentler, almost mournful. I touched the glass and whispered, "I loved you both more than you'll ever understand. But I love myself too, and I won't trade that away." The town's annual summer festival came around, and Margaret convinced me to go. As we walked through the rows of stalls, people stopped me to chat, to ask how I'd been. For the first time in a long time, I didn't hesitate to answer, "Better than I've been in years." I spotted Michael across the square, talking to someone by the lemonade stand. He saw me, froze for a moment, then gave a short nod. I nodded back. That was all. There was no anger left in me, no longing. Just the simple truth. He was on his path, and I was on mine. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the fireflies blink against the dark. I thought about the woman I'd been before all this, the one who gave without boundaries, who mistook silence for peace, who believed love alone could keep people honest. I'm not that woman anymore. I still give, but wisely. I still love, but without letting that love blind me. And I keep my doors, both the real ones and the ones inside my heart, locked to anyone who has shown they can't be trusted with the key. In the quiet of that summer night, I realized something else. The greatest betrayal wasn't what my children had done. It was how I had allowed myself to ignore the truth for so long. And the greatest empowerment was learning that it's never too late to choose differently. So if someone asks me now what I'd say to others in my shoes, I'd tell them this. Family isn't always who shares your blood. Sometimes, family is the friend who stands by you when you're counting your losses. Sometimes, it's the neighbor who waves every morning. And most importantly, it's yourself. Never forget. You are your own family first. Protect that. The fireflies kept flickering in the dark, and I smiled. Not because everything was perfect, it never is, but because I had my life back. And that, after everything, was more than enough. It was early autumn when I realized the last thread had been cut. The air carried that first crisp edge of the season, the one that makes the leaves whisper overhead and the mornings smell faintly of wood smoke. I was on my porch, wrapped in my pale blue cardigan, a quilt over my knees, watching the street where my children used to come running home from school. A letter sat in my lap. It wasn't from Michael or Anna, it was from the county clerk's office, confirming that every legal action I'd taken was officially in effect. My estate, my accounts, my home. All locked safely in my control. No one could touch them now. I thought I'd feel triumph. Instead, I felt something quieter but deeper. Freedom. I decided to mark the moment in my own way. That afternoon, I baked a batch of cinnamon rolls, the kind my grandchildren used to devour, and took them to the community center. The children there, most of them from families with little to spare, swarmed around me with wide eyes and sticky fingers. Their laughter filled the hall, warm and unguarded. It struck me, love given to the right people multiplies. Love given to the wrong people drains you. 4 years, I'd poured my best into hands that were never open enough to hold it. Now, I was learning to pour it elsewhere. That evening, I walked to the lake for the first time since the cabin had been sold. The path was lined with gold and red leaves, crunching under my shoes. When I reached the water, I sat on a bench and closed my eyes. The air was cool, the wind lifting strands of my silver hair, the sound of gentle waves lapping against the shore. For so long, this place had been tied to memories of betrayal. But sitting there, I let those memories drift like fallen leaves on the water. They were part of the past, not my future. I took out my journal, the one that had carried my fears, my plans, and my resolve, and wrote my final entry for this chapter of my life. I am not who I was. I am not broken. I am not powerless. I am the keeper of my own peace, the guardian of my own name. And I will never again give those things away. As the sun dipped low, Turning the lake to molten gold, I stood and began the walk home. The road ahead was quiet, but it was mine. Every step felt lighter than the last, as though the weight I'd been carrying for years had finally slipped away. At my porch, I paused to look up at the first evening star. "Thank you," I whispered, to life, to the lesson, and to myself for listening. Then I went inside, closed the door behind me, and locked it, not out of fear but out of choice. Because I was home. Truly home.